Somebody help me, please. My leg. I cannot feel my leg.
Stay still. Do not try to move.
Who are you? You are not one of the nurses.
No, I am not from the hospital. Hold this against the wound. Press hard.
The shelling is getting closer. No woman should be out here.
And yet here I am.
I do not even know your name.
My name is Mary Seacole. I came from Jamaica. I came a very long way to be right here, so stop talking and let me work.
They said no one would come.
They were wrong.
Welcome back to After Hours. I am Vaughn. When you hear the word nurse, one name comes to mind: Florence Nightingale, the lady with the lamp, the founder of modern nursing. That story is true. No one is taking that away from her. But there was another woman in Crimea. A woman who did not work inside a hospital. A woman who went to the battlefield itself, who walked through artillery fire to reach wounded men lying in the mud. The soldiers did not call her the lady with the lamp. They called her Mother Seacole. Her name was Mary Jane Seacole, born in Kingston, Jamaica, in 1805. Jamaican. Black. The daughter of a Scottish officer and a Jamaican healer called a Doctress. When the Crimean War broke out, she applied to serve as a nurse. The British War Office rejected her. Not once, 4 times, despite having more field experience, treating cholera and battlefield wounds than almost anyone they had hired. So she paid her own way. She built her own hospital. She walked onto the battlefield under fire. And when the war ended, every soldier in the British Army knew her name. And then history forgot her. For 123 years. This is episode 13, The Nurse. Kingston, Jamaica. 1810. The British military maintained a permanent garrison on the island. European soldiers died at extraordinary rates from tropical diseases their medicine barely understood. In the eastern part of Kingston stood a boarding house called Blundell Hall, run by a woman the locals called a Doctress, Mrs. Grant, Mary's mother. Mrs. Grant practiced Creole medicine, a blend of African herbal traditions, indigenous Caribbean remedies, and European knowledge picked up from military surgeons. She knew which plants reduced fever, which bark eased pain, which roots stopped diarrhea, which poultices drew infection out of a wound. She understood the link between contaminated water and disease decades before European doctors accepted germ theory. She boiled her water. She changed dressings regularly. These were revolutionary practices in an era when European hospitals were still debating whether doctors should wash their hands. British officers who arrived sweating and delirious with fever would leave weeks later on their own 2 feet. The British Army doctors could not explain it. And Mrs. Grant had a daughter who followed her everywhere, a daughter who watched everything, a daughter who asked questions constantly and never accepted a vague answer.
Mary, feel this leaf. You see how the underside is rough? That is how you know it is ready. You crush it with a stone until the juice runs. Then you boil it in clean water for exactly 1 hour. The timing matters.
What does it do?
It brings down fever. A soldier came in last night with his whole body on fire. By morning he could sit up and drink broth.
Can I make it myself?
You can watch me make it 3 more times. Then you can try. Medicine is not something you guess at.
By the time Mary was a teenager, she was treating patients alongside her mother with the confidence of someone who had been doing it for years. British officers wrote letters home praising Mrs. Grant and her remarkable daughter. They had watched European-trained doctors fail with their mercury pills and their bloodletting lances. And then they had watched this Jamaican girl clean a wound with lime juice and boil cloth and watched it heal in a week. Mary traveled widely in her 20s. The Bahamas, Haiti, Cuba, England, Everywhere she went, she studied local healing traditions. She sat with healers on every island and asked them what they knew. In 1836, she married Edwin Seacole. He died in 1844. Her mother died that same year. In a few months, she lost the two most important people in her life. Then a great fire swept through Kingston and destroyed the boarding house. Mary rebuilt it. She reopened for business. Because that is what Mary Seacole did when the world knocked her down. She got back up. 1850. The California gold rush had turned the Americas upside down. One main route to the goldfields ran through Panama. And in 1850, cholera arrived. Mary traveled to Panama to visit her brother. Instead, she walked into an epidemic.
How many dead?
Dozens already. The American doctors are bleeding patients who are already dehydrated and giving them mercury pills.
Mercury will kill them faster than the cholera will.
The American doctors would not listen. Not at first. The idea that a black woman from Jamaica could treat a disease baffling European-trained physicians was, to them, absurd. Then the American doctors started dying. The cholera did not care about their degrees.
You need to drink this, all of it. I know it is bitter. Drink it anyway.
The American doctor said your remedies are witchcraft.
The American doctor is dead. He died yesterday morning. My patients are sitting up and asking for food. Now drink.
Mary did something extraordinary in Panama. She performed one of the earliest known autopsies on a cholera victim in Central America. An infant. She studied the organs. She was performing medical research in a jungle camp, while the most prestigious institutions in Europe were still debating whether diseases were caused by bad smells. She returned to Jamaica in 1853, more field experience treating epidemic disease than virtually any nurse in the British Empire. And then the war started. October 1853. The Ottoman Empire, Britain, and France declared war on Russia. The conflict centered on the Crimean Peninsula. The British Army's medical system was catastrophically unprepared. The main hospital at Scutari was overcrowded from the first day. The wards were filthy. Soldiers who survived their wounds died there of cholera and typhus. The Secretary of War recruited Florence Nightingale to lead a team of nurses to Scutari. Nightingale was well-connected, well-educated, respectable, white. Mary Seacole heard about the war and immediately decided to go. She had treated cholera, she had treated dysentery, she knew she could help. She traveled to London at her own expense. She applied to the War Office. Mrs. Seacole, I am afraid we cannot accept you. The positions are filled.
The positions are not filled. A woman accepted yesterday has never treated a sick person in her life. She told me this herself.
I do not make the final decisions. I am sorry. She applied again. Rejected. A third time. Rejected. A fourth time. Rejected. No official reason was ever given.
Was it possible that American prejudice against color had some root here in England? Had I been of a different complexion, my services would have been gladly accepted.
Most people would have gone home. Mary Seacole was not most people. If the British government would not send her to Crimea, she would send herself. She formed a trading partnership with a man named Thomas Day. Their plan was ambitious and possibly insane. They would set up a general store near the front lines that also served as a medical facility. Mary invested everything she had: medicines, surgical instruments, bandages, food, herbal remedies. If this venture failed, she would be completely bankrupt.
You have been rejected by every official body in England. If it fails, you will have nothing. Why are you doing this?
Because those men are dying, Thomas. They are dying of diseases I have treated successfully dozens of times. Am I supposed to sit in a parlor and read about it in the newspaper? That is not who I am.
She stopped briefly at Scutari and met Florence Nightingale. I run a very structured operation. I am not certain your methods would be compatible with my system.
My methods saved lives in Panama when European methods were killing people. But I am not here to argue. I have made my own arrangements.
She arrived at the port of Balaclava in March 1855. She found a plot of land on Spring Hill. Using salvaged materials from wrecked ships, driftwood, packing crates, and iron sheets, she built a structure. They called it the British Hotel. Inside that building, Mary created something that did not exist anywhere else near the front lines. A place where soldiers could sit down and eat a hot meal. Rice and stewed chicken, soups and curries, bread and tea. Food that tasted like food, not like the hard biscuit and salt pork the army provided. She stocked medicines and bandages and blankets. She treated anyone who walked through the door, regardless of rank, regardless of regiment, regardless of whether they had money.
When did you last eat a proper meal? Not biscuit. A real meal.
2 days. Maybe 3. The supply wagons are stuck in the mud.
Sit down. I have rice and stewed chicken, and it is still hot. After you eat, I am going to listen to that cough.
The British Hotel became a lifeline. Word spread through the camps like wildfire. There was a woman up at Spring Hill, a Jamaican woman. She had food. She had medicine. She would treat you for free if you could not pay. Florence Nightingale worked at Scutari Hospital, 300 miles from the fighting. She reduced the death rate from 42% to 2%. Her achievements were real and lasting. But Florence Nightingale never set foot on the battlefield itself. Mary Seacole did. During the siege of Sevastopol, Mary routinely traveled to the front lines. She carried medical supplies on a mule and food on her own back. She set up treatment stations in ditches, sometimes within range of Russian artillery. When the British stormed the Redan, Mary was there. When the French attacked the Malakoff, Mary was there. Not behind the lines, out in the open, while shells exploded around her.
Mother Seacole, for God's sake, get down. The Russians have the range.
This man is bleeding from his neck. If I do not get pressure on it in 2 minutes, he will be dead. The Russians will have to wait their turn.
The soldiers called her Mother Seacole, not Mrs. Seacole. Mother. These were young men, thousands of miles from home, freezing and starving and watching their friends die. And into that misery walked this Jamaican woman with a warm smile and a pot of stewed chicken and medicines that actually worked. She treated everyone, British, French, Sardinian, Turkish. She did not discriminate. She even treated wounded Russians when she found them on the battlefield. A healer does not check the uniform of a bleeding man before she kneels down to help him.
A sick man does not have a country. He does not have a flag. He has pain that needs to stop. That is all I see.
When Sevastopol fell, Mary was one of the first women into the ruined city. She found a Russian infant abandoned in the chaos. She picked up that child and carried it to safety. She also pocketed some seeds from an abandoned Russian garden, because that was Mary Seacole. The war ended in 1856. Florence Nightingale returned to England as a national hero, received by Queen Victoria. Schools named after her. Hospitals named after her. The Lady with the Lamp. Mary Seacole returned to England bankrupt. She had invested everything. The British government did not reimburse her. She arrived in London with nothing. But the soldiers remembered. That is the part of this story that bends it toward justice. The men she had fed, the men she had doctored, the men whose wounds she had stitched while shells burst overhead, those men had not forgotten a single thing. In July of 1857, over 1,000 veterans held a charity gala in London, specifically and exclusively for Mary Seacole. 4 military bands performed. Soldiers stood up and told stories about the time she showed up in the trenches with baskets of food during a bombardment. Punch magazine published a poem in her honor. The Times of London covered it prominently. Her autobiography became a bestseller, one of the first by a black woman in Britain. Queen Victoria subscribed. And then, slowly and completely, the world forgot. For 123 years. Florence Nightingale's legacy was carved in stone. Mary Seacole's grave became overgrown with weeds. In 2004, she was voted the greatest black Briton in a BBC poll. In 2016, a 12-foot bronze statue was unveiled outside St. Thomas Hospital in London, the first statue of a named black woman in the United Kingdom. After her fourth rejection by the War Office, Mary sat down in the street and cried. She knew she could help those men, and no one would let her. Then she wiped her face. She stood up, and she started planning her own expedition. Because that is what you do when every door closes. You stop knocking. You build your own door. She was a healer who learned her craft from her mother, a businesswoman who rebuilt when fire and war and bankruptcy tried to break her, a war veteran who walked through artillery fire on a mule, an author who wrote one of the first autobiographies by a black woman in British history. She was rejected by every institution that should have embraced her. She was forgotten by the country she had served. But the soldiers never forgot. When you are lying in the mud with your leg torn